All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, so we will call the Hudsonville Public Schools Board of Education work session for October 28th of 2024 to order. First up is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up, we have approval of our agenda. If I can have a motion to approve the agenda. Motion from Nick. Support. Support from John. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Recognition of visitors and hearing of people present. We did not have anyone sign up for public comment. So we will move on to discussion items, and first up we have the Sex Education Advisory Board.
Yes, so I'll tee this one off. We have, feel free to move towards the podium. I'd like to introduce Lee Mordike, who's from our Arbor Circle, and Stacy Sills is from the ISD. I'll let them give further, information about their roles, both at their organizations as well as right over to the podium. The microphone is on and waiting for you. I will let them introduce themselves a little bit more with regard to their roles at their organizations as well as with the youth assessment survey.
All right, thanks, Amy. Welcome, everyone. I've actually been in this room before and have presented to the Sex Advisory Board, so this kind of works out. I was able to present to the school board as well. I work for the ISD. I am the health and equity consultant at the ISD. I've been part of the YAS committee for the last 14 years. I know Lee has a little more experience than I do, so I'll let her introduce herself.
My name is Lee Mordike. I'm the Prevention and Advocacy Program Director for Arbor Circle. Arbor Circle coordinates the Ottawa Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, of which I'm the chair, and we are also the fiduciary of the Youth Assessment Survey. And I'm not going to say how many years I've been on there.
Longer than me. So we just wanted to share with you some of the sort of overview of any of the sexual health questions that youth have answered in Hudsonville. Lee did a great job of putting the data together to compare to the county as well. So I'm just going to kind of give a quick overview of what the YAS is. Lee's going to go through some of the data, and then I'll come back to answer any questions that you might have about either one. So the Youth Assessment Survey is a locally funded survey. We've done the Youth Assessment Survey in Ottawa County for the last 10 administrations, which were on our almost 20th year of doing the YAS in Ottawa County. So it has been around for quite a while. As you can see, I'm not going to read through them all, but you can see some of our local agencies and community organizations that have funded the YAS this last administration, which was 2023. And if you look at the bottom, that is our who comprises our Youth Assessment Survey Committee. So someone from each of those organizations is on our committee. Okay, so here's the overview of the YAS. So what is YAS? Just very briefly, it is a survey that is, again, unique to Ottawa County. We survey 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, and we try to get as many like general ed type classes that we can, so the students that are taking it are diverse in nature. It was developed, like I said, almost 20 years ago. It was developed because we didn't have, even then, a state survey at the time. So people got together in our organizations to develop a local survey that we could use throughout the county. We use it for lots of different reasons. The biggest one is we have local data to use to provide information for our local programming and our external organizations that would also use this data. And I'll get into a couple more of those things as well. Who has participated? We have most of our local school districts and even a couple private schools that have participated in the survey over the years. Each survey administration, it kind of varies, but for the most part, we do have most of our local school districts that do participate in the YAS. And thanks, Hudsonville, you are one of them. All right, so one of the things we did this last administration was we wanted to kind of show like some other benefits to the YAS besides data, but that having that data can actually increase funds around the county. So what we were shown is that over $1.5 million in funding was received each year by our local organizations and our districts, and this past year was even over $4 million that it brought in by being able to use this data in different grants and organizational programming. Thousands of teens have been impacted by programming throughout the county. We have, besides the teens that actually took the survey, we have teens in various different community groups, and obviously within our districts, they're able to use the programming that are provided by the use of this data. And then the last one, so many local programs use the data. We have our youth groups and our committees. We have even our hospitals use the data. As you could tell, they were some of the funders for this past year, which was really nice. And we have it just used through, if you can think of an organization around the county, they probably use this data, which is really nice. So the last slide I'm going to talk about is just some data in comparison of who actually is taking the survey in Hudsonville. So Lee put this slide together, and it's just nice to kind of see how your data is very, very similar. So as Lee is going through the data in Hudsonville in comparison to the county, you can kind of see the demographics on this to show that they're very similar to the county as a whole.
Would you like us to wait till the end if we have any questions?
If it's up to you. If there's something about that, I'm happy to answer.
In the first slide, there was something which said that the information and the data collected from this report helped us to gain grants.
Mm-hmm.
How would that information help us to gain grants, and from who did we gain grants?
That's a really good question. So I know a lot of the grants that at least school districts get might be from the Michigan Department of Education. They might be from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. I know our homeless grant that we get through the ISD, which our districts take part in some of those funds, that is provided through MDE. There's also community grants that you go ahead and.
So Arbor Circle does use this data as well, the county level data, to apply for grants. So I mentioned earlier we have the Substance Use Disorder Prevention Coalition, and so it's a requirement of the funding that funds those efforts for us to have this sort of data. And so we're able to use the county level data to meet that requirement and bring in those dollars. In addition, one of our services or our programs is the Raise Your Voice program, where we train high school students on peer refusal skills, and those students go in and teach those evidence-based skills to middle schoolers, which is a program that we've been able to fund through the use of this data. We actually share the county level data with the high school students, and Hudsonville has actually been a long-time partner in providing that service. So we're really empowering your students with this data to speak to their younger peers.
Are these federal grants or are these state grants that you're talking about?
We have received federal funding, we have received state funding, and we've received local funding, and we've received private funding, all through the use of it.
Are there any answers that would come up that would disqualify us from receiving the grant? I mean, I'm trying to figure out exactly how this information is it the demographic information?
So, Mr. Chansky, a lot of grants that we apply for have requirements not only to apply, but when we get feedback. So whenever you apply for grants, it's like, how are you using it? And this is one of the reasons why we use it. So we have surveys that we send out to a lot of things that are part of the grant, applications and so forth.
So Dr. Van Dyke, is it the demographic information that they're interested in, or is it the specific answers to a question that they would be interested in?
I think they're more interested in that there's a process that we follow to ask the questions. Not what the answers are, what the questions are, but the demographics that we are using the survey to.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It depends on the grant too, but for the most part, like Dr. Van Dyke said, it's more that you have the data and are able to use it.
Okay.
There's some smaller grants that want to know specific things, which are nice too, but for the most part.
And I would add, Dr. Chansky or Mr. Chansky, that the grants that they're speaking of are organizations or businesses throughout Ottawa County. So
Okay.
Arbor Circle, for
Sure.
example, not necessarily Hudsonville Public Schools. So they're speaking more globally with regard to organizations throughout
Okay.
Ottawa County.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
Can I ask a question about that slide just a moment too? It says 4,548 total students. Does that mean took the youth assessment survey
In the county.
in the county? And your circle, somehow the graphics got goofed up, but ours on the bottom says 2,078 students. And then underneath the real small letters, it says 46% answered sexual health questions. So if I remember correctly, this survey covers more than just
Yes.
sexual behavior. And some students are choosing not to proceed to answer those questions. Is that correct?
So it's more district based.
Okay.
So it's more like the district has the option to provide those questions or not. So it's not so much like a student would not take those questions per se. It's more like, does the district offer those questions or not? So that's why that number is lower.
Gotcha. Okay.
And students can always opt out of any question.
Yes.
They can always just skip it and not answer it.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure I remembered that.
And parents can
correctly.
opt out in general for the whole survey.
Yes.
If they
Um,
want.
I apologize. Somehow that graphic did not stay when I saved and emailed it. So it's 4,548 total students across Ottawa County took the survey, 782 Hudsonville students, and for the total across the county that took the sexual health section was 2,078 students.
Thank you for clarifying.
So this first slide is about relationships. So it's really asking students, what relationships were you in and how healthy was that relationship? Generally, relationship risk behaviors are stable or have improved since 2017. We did change the definition. So at one point it would have said, have you dated anyone, or have you had a boyfriend or girlfriend? And that really is not our students' language anymore. And so this is why we're asking, I have dated or gone out with someone in the past year. And so the questions are at the bottom. Is this laser pointer? This is the entire survey and the entire sample. These questions are out of this percentage. So out of that 49% of Hudsonville students who have dated or gone out with someone, 10% have gone out with someone who called them names in the past year. So the orange is 2017, the light blue is 2019, the little bit darker blue is 2021, the real dark blue is Ottawa County in 2023, and then the gray is Hudsonville. So that will be the same for the next few slides. So you can see on, in this slide when we're talking about relationships, your students are reporting the same behaviors as their peers across Ottawa County, either at the same rate or lower than their peers across the county.
So one question, just unclear. The first four bars are countywide for each of those years,
Correct.
and then the last one is Hudsonville for 2023.
Yes.
Correct. Yep. That will change throughout. The next slide is the same, but it will change a little bit throughout, and I'll tell you when that happens.
Awesome. Thanks.
This it did not click forward for me. There we go. This next slide is sexting. So this is really those behaviors that are sending or receiving text messages or other media between them and their peers, mostly their peers, in the past year. And so again, this is the same. The first four are the county level for the different years, and then the gray is Hudsonville in 2023. And so you can see that Hudsonville, again, your students are lower or roughly the same as their peers across the county in engaging in sexting behavior. And 13% of Hudsonville 12th graders participated in any sexting activity. And this is really important because when you get to those last two questions, where they're sending and posting naked or semi-naked videos, photos or videos, or they're sharing those photos or videos, we're really talking about illegal child pornography activity.
Dr. Vanderjack?
Yeah, can you hit your, there you go, I just wanted to see the 13%.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, didn't we just embark on something to try to enlighten our students about the ramifications and consequences of sexting? Did you do that earlier?
No, it was more along fake, like deep fakes.
Oh, okay, okay.
This is content within our sex ed or our reproductive health lessons.
Oh.
So it's relationships, but these types of risk behaviors as well.
Okay.
And it's exciting to see in the last 7 years how much has gone down. Some of it may be a fad thing, that they're being educated about not only personal danger, but the legal danger to it.
Mhm.
So I'm thrilled to see.
It's one of the, just in terms of like how this data might get used, it's one of the places in which with the Raise Your Voice program, we were asked to touch on it and to the high school students. And so we've been doing that for a long time. You can see their increased knowledge. So this is about pornography, who has been affected in 2023 by pornography. So along the far side is the categories, the demographic categories: Hudsonville, overall county, 8th, 10th, and 12th, and then female and male, and then our race and ethnicity categories for the YAS. Where there are not bars in several of the next slides, where there is not data listed, that means that the size of the sample was so small that we suppressed the information to maintain the anonymity of the students and to prevent anyone from being able to really identify who those students were. We take that very seriously. So you can see again, in terms of access pornography, Hudsonville students say they access less than the county overall. It tends to go up with age. And our male students, I don't know, those numbers disappeared.
It's bigger than 17.
Yeah. Sorry.
I
don't know what just happened.
If you want to know, the board, do you have
Yes,
access
we
to
have.
it?
Yes, we have
We
it.
can see
Right.
that. Yeah.
So our female students report having accessed pornography less than the male students. And then who has accessed pornography by age 13? We know that the younger students participate in these risk behaviors, the worse the outcomes are long term. So Hudsonville again reports accessing pornography by age 13 less than overall. It sort of evens out with age. And then females actually report an earlier age than males. And when you see the demographic breakdowns here, those are specific to your school. The county is listed in order to have some comparison. And then access pornography in the past 30 days. So this is recent behavior. And Hudsonville again reports less than the county overall. Oops, I'm sorry. It again increases with age, and males report more recent access than females. This is the age of onset. So we calculate this based on among 12th graders, and so we actually want this to go up. Older is better. We want students to delay this behavior, and that has been increasing. Age of onset is Ottawa County only. Honestly, I am not an epidemiologist and I can't do that calculation myself. And so this is county overall. And so then this is, let me go to the next slide. So this next slide is once again, like, have you ever had oral sex, sexual intercourse, or sexual intercourse in the last 3 months? Sexual behaviors are the lowest since 2007. So the line graphs that you see, those are Ottawa County. And then the Hudsonville student responses are in the words right here. So 6.4% of your students have had sexual intercourse, and 4.7 of the total Hudsonville population that answered the questions had sexual intercourse in the last 3 months.
What is the population? I mean, is how many responses do you get? How do the
It's based on that first slide that has all the demographics.
782.
okay.
So then with the demographics, do you break that down, the 6.4% had sexual intercourse? Do you look at 8th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade? Do you break it down even further?
Yes, I don't remember if off the top of my head, I could look it up, but I don't remember off the top of my head that data was suppressed. If it was a small enough sample size to suppress the data.
For Hudsonville.
For Hudsonville specifically, yes.
County level, we have it.
Oops, I hit the wrong button. So this next is the orange is county, the blue is Hudsonville in 2023, and then the light gray is male, and the dark is female. And so this is I've had sexual intercourse. Hudsonville is lower than the county overall. Females are reporting more sexual intercourse than males. I've had sexual intercourse before the age of 14. Hudsonville is reporting lower than the county. There's no male and female data because of the suppression of data. Sexual intercourse in the past 3 months, again, Hudsonville is lower, but females report this behavior more than males. Having it with 4 or more people, so this is of students that have had sexual intercourse. Hudsonville is reporting less than the county overall. And then having sexual intercourse when I did not want to, of those that had sexual intercourse, is pretty even. That would be within the margin of error. This next slide, so there is a gap in this chart. The orange is again Ottawa County, the blue is Hudsonville. The gap is to denote that the last 4 are out of the sample size of I've had sexual intercourse in the past 3 months. So of those that have had sexual intercourse in the past 3 months, what did they do before they had sexual intercourse? So Hudsonville and the county are pretty much the same within the margin of error, drank alcohol and used drugs before they had sexual intercourse. Hudsonville is a little bit lower than the county and did not use a condom with an opposite sex partner. Hudsonville is a little bit lower in the county for I used birth control pills to prevent pregnancy, and then no method was used to prevent pregnancy during last sexual encounter with the opposite sex is 8% in the county, and the sample is small enough that we suppressed that for Hudsonville. So this is a place where for these last 4, you want them higher. Or no, you want them lower. You want them lower.
No.
No, you want the 3 and 4, you want higher than
Correct.
the use protection.
Yes. I use birth control pills. You want those higher. I drink alcohol and use drugs. You want that lower. I did not use a condom with the opposite sex. You want that lower. And then no method was used. You want that lower as well. Some of these double negative statements can be very difficult.
So I'm wondering, is like, who put those questions together when you're asking
They are all
some
based.
negative, some positive?
They are all based on fidelity tested questions, which is how they are written, and our epidemiologist that works with us can explain why, but it's not my skill set.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So this is of those who have ever had sexual intercourse. You can see the N is really small, which is why this data is suppressed. But this is really about not using a condom, and I've been tested to just sort of demonstrate the demographic breakdown. This next slide is human trafficking. So about 2.9% of teens in Ottawa County schools say they have been trafficked for sex or work. So again, this wasn't one that I could pull for just Hudsonville. And then we do also ask about beliefs and perceptions. So are there consequences for sexual intercourse? Are there consequences for oral sex? As an adult or unadult has talked to me about sex, and my parents don't think it's wrong for me to have sex. And so Hudsonville is reporting a little bit better than the county overall. Most of this decreases with age, and it's pretty even across the genders. Any other questions?
Back on that last slide that you showed for consequences, I would hope that they would all be equal and all high. You know, because what that's showing is agree there are consequences to intercourse. Our 8th graders look like they realize there's more consequences versus a 12th grader.
Yes, yep, it decreases with age.
And really you want it to stay consistent or you want it all high.
Yeah, yes, that is what you would want. Mm-hmm.
Any reason why? I mean, a 10th grader wouldn't understand that there's more consequences than an 8th grader?
Well, there's a little bit of the education when it comes to when the curriculum starts in 7th grade. So they hear it more recently in 7th grade, and then as you get older, it's a different, it's different. In high school, they don't have like they just got another unit in 7th grade. It's like that, show where you're smarter than a 5th grader. You haven't had it a long time, so sometimes you forget some of the conversations.
With that being said, would it be appropriate for us to double back with our 10th graders and say,
So there are lessons that are taught in our 9th grade health class, but I think Mr. Jansky, that's exactly what our Sex Ed Advisory Board is going to be grappling with. That's how we use this data, is to determine what next steps might be for programming or topics that we might need to be paying particular attention to, and then using this data to measure any outcomes that we can. So we had the opportunity to see similar presentation at our September Sex Ed Advisory Board meeting. And they're really anxious to dive in a little bit more and get reconnected to the lessons that might really directly connect to this content and review, you know, where those lessons come. And so yes, your questions are exactly some similar questions that our Sex Ed Advisory Board wants to do for everyone we're meeting in January.
And I think it's a little bit telling as well that the last column talks about my parents do not think it's wrong for me to have sex, that directly correlates with a 12th grader's thinking that there are consequences. And I think there's something to that. If in some families, once you reach a certain age, if you consider it more acceptable, they maybe are taking steps to make sure the consequences aren't there. And you know, that those are family decisions to be made. And so as much as we want to continue to educate children about the risks, I think recognizing that there are families who are preparing their children for college might not necessarily feel as strongly as someone with an 8th grader.
Amy, apart from using this data to get grants, how do we use this data to improve our students?
So the Sex Ed Advisory Board saw the presentation in September and will review it again in January. They would like to dive into it more, connect it to particular lessons and review the curriculum to see if there's any additional education that we need to be paying attention to, or using that as an example of a decline in students thinking that there are consequences to intercourse, thinking through, gosh, if there's a decline, are there additional lessons that need to be taught throughout the course of a student's education and access to health classes, et cetera, that we need to be tending to. So we are intentionally aligning program goals and outcomes with data sources such as this to measure any next steps.
Anything else?
Thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you.
On the YAS committee, we really appreciate you taking the survey as well as the sex ed question, because it really helps the county as a whole be able to provide these, and the more data we have, the better the presentations will be. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here, your explanation. The additional piece that I would add that the Sex Ed Advisory Board, thank you, would like, and I'll just offer for discussion, we've had conversation in the past year on our website, we have access to a lot of information about our reproductive health programming and the Sex Ed Advisory Board and the members and so forth. And we have added overall Ottawa County Youth Assessment Survey data, but there has been conversation from the Sex Ed Advisory Board of adding Hudsonville specific data, again with consciousness of suppressing, not adding suppressed data into that to protect anonymity. However, I guess I would like your thinking around that and support for developing some type of one-pager, for example, that could be Hudsonville specific in comparison to Ottawa County to add to our webpage. So I'd just like your thoughts around that. And
why wouldn't we? Why would we want our parents to know where our students are at?
Yeah, I think that's been the
And
conversation.
obviously, you should suppress. If it was suppressed here, we certainly would release it to our families.
Yeah.
But
So
why wouldn't we want them to know?
I think the Sex Ed Advisory Board, that's exactly the conversation they're having. We just never have. And so just out of wanting to be clear and transparent of putting some data out there that we've never shared before in Hudsonville, I wanted an opportunity to get your thoughts on that.
I would want parents to know as much as can be known.
Great.
Other downsides.
Not that I can see, it's our student data. I think we, as a Sex Ed Advisory Board, are intentionally connecting the data to program outcomes and adjustments, and so, thank you. I just wanted to, because we've never shared that data before, I wouldn't have wanted that to be a surprise to anybody.
When students or parents would ever allow for their students to take this questionnaire, is there any limitations to its use that folks agree to before they take it?
No,
Okay,
they
so
opt in, or they opt out, they opt out if they don't want their child to participate in the survey.
And then share some demographic information, not with each email address.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to beat a dead horse issue, but this question about agree there are consequences for intercourse, going from 88 to 69 for a 12th period. I mean, there are emotional consequences. There are not just, whether someone gets pregnant or not. And that's something that's very troubling to me, that our kids would seem to just not be thinking about. And if I, as a parent, would want to know that, so that I could sit down with my child and say, okay, listen, are you one of these who in the 8th grade thought it was not good and there's consequences to life, as opposed to someone in the 12th? I mean, that's a very important thing to me.
Sure.
And I'm not saying we're not doing everything we can, but I think this data and information would be important.
I think that ties in my mind with really the process we went through from going from abstinence only to abstinence-based, because abstinence is the foundation of both program types.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going from that space of there
Sure.
are consequences, and abstinence is the 100, that's law that we have to lead in that direction,
Yeah.
right? That abstinence is the number one way to remain emotionally safe, physically safe, not unwanted pregnancies, all of those categories, if you will. But you can't even enter into some of those other consequences of participating in those risk behaviors if you're abstinence only.
Right.
So I think that's to be noted as well, that opens the door for those conversations. And the Sex Ed Advisory Board has always been very passionate about ensuring parents are included in those conversations, created specific lessons. Those of you who were around when we went through that process, that was key, and that was really important.
I just want to reinforce what Greg has said, that I don't see anything more important than for children to understand the consequences, because we're living in a culture that says there are no consequences. It's just an act of behavior, and they need to understand the immediate and the long-term consequences of this.
I agree with Greg and Mark. If I was a parent, I would want to know that.
So I would too.
Are there similar data for neighboring counties or the state or something that we could also compare to? This is all Ottawa County. Is this an Ottawa County specific thing?
It's Ottawa County. There is state data as well. I'm not familiar with other counties. Jack, are you? I'm familiar with Ottawa County and then state level data. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is our audit.
We do have one more item under the.
Oh, membership, one more item. So at our September Sex Ed Advisory Board meeting, I have a recommendation from our Sex Ed Advisory Board for 2 new board members to join. One is Meg Morehouse. She is a teacher at the high school, and she would be replacing a teacher who left. And so their recommendation is to all of you is to accept her as a member of our Sex Ed Advisory Board. And then also a student, Hayden Heisinga, to replace the student that graduated. So just filling a couple empty spots, but as you know, that's formal approval that's needed from you to officially place them on our Sex Ed Advisory Board. This is for discussion here, and then as in the past, that has come before the board as an action item at the board meeting.
Other than the name, do we receive any information or background on these people?
No.
Okay.
Not when it's a student or a staff member.
How, just out of curiosity, how are they identified? Is it something
Yeah.
that they raise their hand and express interest? Or?
So the staff member is someone who replaced someone who left, who teaches the curriculum, so that's important to have them at the table. And then from a student perspective, we have counselors who seek out students from various student groups and who might express interest, and this student accepted the invitation.
Remember again how many students are on it?
3,
All high schoolers?
yes.
I guess I have a question. We're asked to approve this, but all I have is 2 words, a name with nothing else, and I have no idea who these people are. And I'm not saying they're good or bad or indifferent, but why would we have that as a part of the process if there's no background? Have these people been screened at all by anybody?
So I think that there's 2 different categories. Staff and a student is one lane,
Sure.
right? And so a staff who's teaching it replaced a staff who left who was teaching it. So that has some credentials, if you will,
Sure.
of kind of a voice and a connection to students. And then from a student perspective, certainly the parents agree that the student can participate and they're showing interest that this is something that they would like to do. From the perspective of other members who are invited, you may remember that is a full process of vetting and using a rubric and
Right.
aligning, and so these categories are a bit different to your point. So that's the process as it is at this time.
Does the student have any say in the decision-making of the,
They're a voting member, yes, they're part of the Sex Ed Advisory Board.
okay. It still begs the question, how come it's, in my mind, how come it's different? How come it's different?
It's just been the process that we've followed, to be quite honest with you, looking for students who are willing to lean into this work and who want to be part of it.
The question I had, Amy, was 3 students, so I thought 3, and then I thought 8, 10, 12, because the survey kind of focused on that. Has there been any thought about having representation from the 8th, 10th, and 12th?
We have not talked about having a middle school student. I think this is just territory that we're continuing to navigate as we move forward and continue to refine processes and procedures and expressed interest in those types of things.
We don't administer the survey every year, so it's every other year. So
Yeah, I know they age out,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
recognize that.
Seniors traditionally have a greater understanding of the educational process that they've been through, so I guess it's one.
So we have 3 students,
Yes,
and we're just replacing
one that graduated.
We'll be placing a couple more.
Any other questions on membership? Okay, we'll move on to the audit.
Thank you. Joel Corson from our audit firm will present, and I think somebody's going to, yes, move the PowerPoint along.
Well, Dr. Vanderjack's getting that set up. I'd just like to start off by saying thank you for having me tonight. My name is Joel Corson. I have been with the firm, Mayor Starrison, for about 11 years now. I'm a principal with the firm as well. We can jump to the first slide here. So what we have tonight is a very, very high-level overview of your audit. We did conduct, the second point here, we did conduct a finance committee meeting about a month ago. It was about an hour and a half long. We went through in quite extensive detail the audit with 3 members of the board here, as well as the administrative team and the finance individuals as well. So we have gone through quite a lot more detail. If you get to the end of this and say, well, they didn't cover anything, that's kind of why the high level detail here tonight. Then jumping back to the previous one, you can leave it here. Just a thank you to the finance team. They do a lot of work to get ready for the audit. It is a cumbersome process. It is a time-extensive process. They do a lot of really good work to get us here today. So again, high level, the audit results here, we have an unmodified opinion. That is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as your auditors. That's what the community should expect to see, and that's what you as the board should expect to see as well. In terms of federal awards, you do spend more than $750,000 of federal dollars. That qualifies you for a single audit. And then we did test ESSER this year. That is probably more than likely the last year we will test ESSER just as those funds start to sunset. We don't have any findings, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, anything like that. You do have 2 more things that we comment on here at this slide. The first one being your bonded construction dollars. So really what we're doing there, in addition to what we would normally do, that's vouching, you pull the invoices, make sure they were bid, things like that. We're making sure that what you spent your dollars on were what the community originally intended when they approved the millage. And then on the sinking fund, the same thing. You're making sure that you're spending those in line with sinking fund dollars. The next 2 slides are very high-level overviews of your federal or your total revenues and then your expenditures on the next page. The 2 things I'd like to point out here would be just the general increase, the trend upward. That's what you want to see. You're getting additional categorical dollars. You're getting additional federal funding, state funding, local funding, really everything. The second thing I'd like to point out would be those gray boxes. They went from, I think it's 3% to 7% to 6% to 7%. Most of that's ESSER funding. That's all one-time funding. That's largely done totally done as of now, but largely done as of 6/30. So we would expect those to drop back to the 2 to 4% range next year. But again, keep in mind it's a very small subset of what you actually receive in funding. We talk about federal funding all the time, but it's really just a sliver when it comes to your funding sources. And then on the next slide, you'll see basically the exact same thing. You're not a for-profit entity. You're intended to bring in dollars and spend those on student education. So as your revenues have increased over the last years, your expenditures have followed suit as well. And then we'd also like to point out the split between your instruction, the bottom column, or the bottom section rather, and then the top section is your support, so really everything else for the most part. That's what you'd want to see at your district level. Usually it's about a 55 to 60% instruction versus the remainder being in support. And then this is what we like to call your report card, or I guess Pat and Jody's report card. We talk about your budget. We split that up into 2 categories here. The top one being your revenues, the bottom one being, or the middle one here being your expenditures. So for context, you are required to budget both revenues and expenditures. You're not supposed to go negative on either, even technically $1. You could receive a letter from the state saying you didn't receive enough money, or you spent more than you were allowed to spend, more than the board approved to spend. So you're budgeting to 0 technically, but most districts will wager about a 1 or 2% variance on the positive side. So about a 1% variance on your revenues, again, positive side, and a 3.3% variance on your expenditures, positive being you spent less than what the board approved. So both very good indicators right there. This is just an informative slide. It's not required. We always put it up here. This top major section is all prior year data. We don't have 23, 24 data yet because the audits aren't due until Friday, I believe. So this is all last year's data, but you can see yourself right in the middle there, 23.6% fund balance as a percentage of your expenditures. The very top is statewide, so you're a little bit ahead of state. And then this year, we did put your number down there at the bottom, and just for context, we're expecting that top number for 23-24 to be somewhere between 24 and 25%. So you're just above state averages. We expect you to be just above state averages when all this data comes out next year. Next slide. Again, one more slide on your single audit. You have significantly more than $750,000 of expenditures of federal awards. $6.7 million. ESSER, I believe, was about 4.1 of that, so right around 60%. Again, that's going to crater next year. It's going to come down significantly. You probably will certainly be testing a different major program, probably special education, one of the other significant ones that you have. but you still will be required to have a single audit next year. So for this year, you got a lot of no's in the right-hand column. That's where you want to be. It's not on this page, but you are considered low risk. That's also what you want to be. On the next slide, I think is our last one. So the other two items that we always comment on, the first one is a required letter that if you look at the financial statement packet you do have. That is our governance letter. It's basically a cookie cut letter that says we did an audit. There wasn't any sort of significant disagreements with us in management. There wasn't any uncorrected mistakes, and then a couple other kind of cookie cutter topics in there. If that letter is longer than you're used to seeing, that's a bad thing, and yours is exactly the same. It's been for a number of years. And then the second letter is the management letter. That does not exist this year. Again, that's something that you don't necessarily want to see. So if you have significant control weaknesses or any other matters that we believe we need to bring to the board's attention, you would receive that letter. There's no letter like that this year. So I told you it was going to be very high level. That is all we have for you. Do you have any questions? We can get into a little bit more detail if there are questions.
As you're thinking of questions you may have, I do want to thank Jody, Pat, Lindsay, the whole team in the finance department. You guys do an amazing job. I appreciate it.
Certainly agree.
If you think of any other questions, I was wondering about our credit rating.
I don't know your credit rating offhand. Is that a?
Yeah.
I'm sure the pack can probably comment on that.
So our credit rating is, I would say, it's favorable for our stats, meaning we score well because the board supports a high fund balance. We've got a fund balance minimum now. We've done the things we can do. It's just the struggle with a community like Hudsonville is we need to borrow to fund our growth, and we're not a mature community yet, meaning that we don't have a ton of, our homes have children in them. We don't have a lot of empty nester homes, or lakefront homes or commercial property. So our property to debt ratio is just what it is. So I think when Doug and I get on those credit calls for the bond ratings, we pull every possible thing we can out, but there are just certain structural issues we have that our financial consultants say, you're punching over your weight right now, but keep going. We're doing as good as we can.
I don't want to distract
Yeah.
You could just a good time just to hear a little synopsis of what affects the cut, but another time, not right.
We'll lead into that. Maybe in a couple board meetings, we'll have some things, but yeah.
We'll have to bring you back and it's a couple of you
I could have said.
in the crowd.
I don't know, perfect.
Sure.
Well, if no other questions, I just wanted to, again, thank you for the time tonight, and everyone have a good evening.
Thank you.
Before Joel gets too far away, I'd like to thank them, because for the last 2 years, they've actually sent partners out in the field, which has really made the lift on Jody and the rest of the people, because Jody and Stacy in the business office. I think she would agree. It's very nice. And I have a couple people think. The District of Hudsonville, I mean, the board has supported for years, and this board continues to support strong financial systems, and that helps a lot. I mean, it's right in our SOAR. It's one of our SOAR goals. I thank you for supporting that. A superintendent and his cabinet, we talk about this compliance and financial matters all the time. It wouldn't happen without that. And then all the departments through central office do something with compliance. You know, HR, special ed, curriculum, outside the business office do something that helps us with not just, well, all kinds of compliance. Jody and Stacy in particular, Stacy's not here tonight, but just their leadership, their work on the audit, the rest of the business office. But I really want to talk about, in particular, our principals, department heads, and their admin assistants. With this, I know Amy would say this, but with this, and with the positions, the things with the 11T ESSER dollars, they've done a lot more with compliance and budget management. So it's a team, and we're lucky to have a great team in Hudsonville. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to just say, yeah, appreciate it, but like, we just had the latest MASB podcast that we got to talk about the complexities of the financials. So Joey, thanks for all your work.
Thank you,
But, yeah, something we should not take for granted in Hudsonville at all, how
Yeah.
solid staff is.
In fact, I want to comment on that too, Nick. I listened to that podcast that Nick forwarded to us last week to the board. And, you know, as well as we're doing here, and we are doing very well, because of Dr. Vanderjack, because of you, Pat, because of Jody and Stacy, and we're one or two people away from not doing so well. Just from the standpoint of, and they were talking in that podcast about the fact that the replacement line isn't there like it used to be. That when you had a Pat before and he went away, there was a Pat Junior ready to go. And those places aren't there anymore. And they offered some suggestions, such as maybe getting interns or things like that. And I think that's something that maybe over the next year as a board, we should start to consider those things, because, you know, probably in another 15, 20 years, Pat isn't going to be here. Right?
30,
So we 40.
Some succession plan.
Yeah.
All right, next up is our SAB and STEP assessment.
Yes, so annual presentation on state assessments here this evening. You'll see some typical formats of data, so we'll just jump in and get us started. The last few years, we have really used this opportunity to highlight a lot of celebrations of data across Hudsonville by comparing ourselves not only to Ottawa County and the state, but also a peer group, which is identified as districts across the state that you can see listed here that have similar student count and similar free and reduced lunch. So those are comparables, if you will, that are often used and will be used here this evening. And then, as I mentioned, the other comparable is districts across Ottawa County that we compare ourselves to as well. So jumping right in, this slide indicates all state assessments. So it showcases districts' proficiency over time on MSTEP, which is 3rd through 8th grade, all content areas, as well as PSAT, which our 8th graders take, and SAT, 11th grade. The red line is Hudsonville Public Schools. The orange line is that peer group based on similar enrollment in free and reduced. And then the green line is Ottawa Area ISD, and then the state of Michigan. And now that will stay consistent across all of the slides that I'm presenting here this evening. Correct.
Say that again?
Averages across this peer groups as well as all assessments, ELA, math, social studies, science. So starting with high level, and then we'll drill down a little bit as we go.
Amy, would you like us to wait if we have any questions to get through the whole thing?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
that's
think that
fine.
might be helpful.
Yep.
So just jot them as you go,
Right, okay.
and then we can I might answer it
Sure.
by the end, and you can
Right.
cross it off. How's
Okay,
that sound?
thank you very much.
Okay.
Can I just real quick, sorry, the orange line here is reflective of the data in the chart below, correct?
Correct.
The orange line is, okay, got it.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's the peer group
Yep, good.
that is statewide.
Perfect, thank you.
So this is MSTEP specifically. So again, this is all MSTEP content areas, ELA, math, science, and social studies. Again, you can see that Hudsonville averages outperforms across the state, as well as Ottawa County and certainly Michigan. Again, we'll continue to drill down. So now we have all students in math on MSTEP. Our 3rd through 7th grade students take MSTEP, and this is the math data as it compares to like districts. Ottawa Area, ISD, and Michigan. You can see that we continue to perform above those peer groups. PSAT, this is our 8th grade students in the area of math, and again, indicated by the red line is Hudsonville in comparison to the others. This is our SAT data, all subjects, so they take math as well as evidence-based reading and writing. And this is comparing both of those contents, and then again, we'll drill down further. One thing that I will point out to you, you can see that on the graphs, so for example, this particular graph has a top starting point on the left-hand side of 70% proficient. Some of them, you'll notice, are at 65%. So it's just an important detail when you're looking at graphs. This is just how Unitrix designs the graphs, which is not always favorable by a true statistician. They would want that top number to be exactly the same on all graphs. You might think that might be who wishes that this was different. And I do too, but not enough to create all the graphs on my own. So I'll just point out that detail for our attention. So this is now drilling down SAT, 11th grade math scores over the course of, again, being able to use these graphs for both trends as well as specific data. Looking at, for example, an interesting one, item here for our review is that we seem to have a little bit of a drop here in Hudsonville of all subjects, and then really leveled out the past year. For example, enrollment in free and reduced, they had a continued decline. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can use this trend data. This one in particular is interesting, both from a math perspective, both our peer group across the state, as well as Ottawa County had a drop in the past year. Ours trended up a little bit. So it's just fascinating, and we are working with our principals. We have already done some data reviews, drilling down to specific building data, grade level data. We have a district improvement team meeting on Wednesday evening, where we'll dive in even more with some data. So there's lots of things that we do with data this time of year to set school improvement goals, district improvement goals, for principals to be able to share. We also are sharing data we have a pre-K 12 ELA committee. We are establishing a pre-K 12 math committee. So all of this data becomes very relevant to teachers as we're looking at standards. So there's a ton we do with data. This is just that look of how we compare. This is M-STEP, all students moving into the area of ELA. So again, 3rd through 7th grade, continuing to outperform from an average perspective of those peer groups and the state. This is PSAT 8th grade ELA. This is SAT. So at the 11th grade level, when they take the SAT, it's no longer called ELA, it's called evidence-based reading and writing. All students in the area of science, you can see a trend. We continue to outperform across comparison of the peer groups. This is 5th grade science. We test science in 5th, 8th, and 11th. So here's 8th grade science, 11th grade science, moving into social studies, again, 5th, 8th, and 11th grade, so similar. We can look at trends, we can look at dips. There's not a ton of standards data that we can access anymore, and even less now, even at the SAT level. Now that we've moved to online, we don't anticipate some of the drill down reports will be accessible. So there's some challenges when we're working with teacher groups and principal groups to drill down as far as we wish we could with state level data. But what we do see, and I think we've shared this before, is that our STAR assessment data that kindergarten through 8th grade students take, we see a very high correlation between outcomes on STAR, which is the benchmark we give 3 times a year, and outcomes on M-STEP. And so that we give 3 times a year, so we can use that data to modify and adjust not only daily instruction across grade levels, in buildings, for example, but also for interventions for students and that type of thing. So it allows us to be a little bit more responsive. This is the autopsy at the end of the year, right? Still very important, but we use different kinds of data for different purposes. Again, here's 8th grade social studies, 11th grade social studies. You can see the COVID dips across significant, but everybody's climbing back, which is good.
There is a missing year of 2020.
Yes. Okay. Indeed. And then finally, advanced placement courses. We've earned an AP honor roll, silver medal for this year, and that is based on some of the statistics that you see on this slide, the total number of students, the number of exams, the number of students who scored a 3 or better. You can see that not only are students' enrollment in AP courses is increasing, but also the number of students who are receiving the proficiency level that is beneficial for them. So lots to celebrate with regard to our achievement data. I guess I would also add and just repeat myself that we are digging in at all different levels. Data is an important piece of what we do and how we dive in and make change. So
I want to thank Amy and the curriculum team that put a lot of work not only to the assessments that have to take place, but then analyzing and looking at the data. In the past, years ago, you could take this data, drill it down to the teacher, to the content standard, to actually the question, and find out is it a good question, is it a bad question, are we not teaching that, should we be teaching at a different grade level? They don't allow you to do that anymore. So that's why the STAR assessment is vital to this work, because we can do that to determine whether or not, most of the questions are we would consider to be reliable questions. They're asking what we want to measure, but that's not always the case. And sometimes we're presenting things differently than the state would word them, so we need to be knowledgeable too. So they put a lot of work into not only this data, but then drilling it down as best they can and using it to make changes that maybe need to be made. We are not going to teach to the test, to be clear, but we do want to make sure we're teaching to the standards and that they're measuring the standards. But there are times when you could have an 8th grade math assessment that has 55 questions on 5 different standards. And there are 38 standards you're trying to cover, and you gotta hit the right 5, so we wanna make sure we get them all. And then make sure we assess our kids. So this is a snapshot, this is great. We look at it and think, look, we're doing very well. And then we move on and we roll up the sleeves and get after the classroom.
I've asked you this question before, Amy, but do we select our own peer group? We're at the top of every chart, right, which is awesome. Is that like a state level thing that says these are your peers, compare yourself to these data? So like
yes.
Brighton's board room is gonna see Hudsonville's data just like we see Brighton's data?
So that peer group is selected by Unimetrics, which is the system we use to generate data, and it pulls districts that are similar in size and a similar free and reduced population. So a similar demographic of students is the scenario or the picture that you're trying to paint with that data set.
Sure.
And so those districts are those districts.
The software selects it for us. It's not us looking and picking out which ones we.
No, you select by those criteria, and then they say, here's your peer group.
Well, it just looks great, and I think it's incredible, but the scientist in me is like, how?
There's 3 types of districts, right? There's ones that are close to you locally, county. There's ones that you look at from size and fingers, lunch count, and then there's others that you talk about.
Sure.
Right? You compare yourself to other districts by nature, whether it's by athletic program, whether it's by an academic situation.
Sure.
So we look at really the 2 are the ones that I wouldn't say are assigned, because if you're at the bottom size-wise, your peer group might look different because you're going to get districts a little bit smaller than you, and larger.
Sure. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Any other questions?
For math, sometimes I know that we have struggled a little bit, I think with our, is it 5th grade math? Does any of this show 5th grade math? I look, we have all students math, we have 8th grade math, 11th grade math. Is there anything that shows how we're doing now with 5th grade
With
math?
5th grade, this particular report that I have here this evening doesn't go by grade level. I have that trend data that shows over time, basically you can look at cohort data, 3rd grade, how they do in 4th grade, how they do in 5th grade, how they do in 6th grade. You can track that over time. I also have reports that show specific 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and that's some of the data that we're working with other groups as well.
And it's probably too soon to even know if our new math curriculum, because we've just
absolutely, that'll take a few years.
That'll take
a few years. I think where we will see some gains and teachers have anecdotally already shared is with our STAR assessment. So for example, 3rd grade at a building was like, oh my goodness, our students who piloted this Bridges curriculum as 2nd graders last year, their scores at the beginning of 3rd grade, we've never seen them this high. So that is really rare, and I certainly don't want to hang my hat on that. That's anecdotal. But I think that we will be, because of STAR, we will be able to see some of those incremental changes as we go throughout the year with looking at that STAR data.
That's good. That's good.
You bring up a really good point, because those are we've been looking closely at those math scores, and the 5-6 building is another indicator.
Yes.
What is that? We've always seen a transition to 6th grade is different, right? And so when you measure kids in 6th grade, when they're used to having one teacher all year, it looks different. What does it look like now when 6th graders they were at the 5-6 for 2 years? So we'll know it after this year. So.
All good things, thank you.
Just to add to that real quick, my kids have never been more excited about math than this year.
Awesome. That
It's-
makes me really happy.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot,
Yeah.
honestly, from parents, that even parents who work in the district, they say, my kids come home excited about math.
Yeah, that wasn't me, so.
Exactly. That's one of the values and beliefs that the math committee put together, right? Is really students' identity around math and not seeing themselves as, I'm a math person or I'm not a math person. Oh, no, we're all math
We're all.
persons.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, Amy, I have a couple of questions. The first slide, if you could put that one back up there for a second.
Yes.
And I want to reiterate what Andrew said about the fact that, the first graph slide, I mean,
Oh, first.
yes, I want to reiterate the fact that it's very impressive that when I look at all of these charts, at the beginning, at the top of them is, without exception, Hudsonville, so that's excellent, you to be commended for that. This one right here, it shows that in 2019, we were far ahead of everybody else. I mean, they weren't even close. And right now, we don't have that distance between us. Some schools have gotten back to where they were in 2019, others haven't. Can you tell me, when you look at that slide, in your position, what do you say about that slide? What do you?
So that's where I would say that it becomes critical to look at the particular grade levels.
Okay.
So because I have spent time with that, I would say some grade levels have done this, some grade levels have done that. Sometimes you make connections to the cohort of students that actually all cross all of the state testing areas. This is a group that is scoring lower for whatever reason. Lots of hypotheses can be made about that. Gosh, what grade were they when COVID happened, and how has this impacted them? What content did they miss that might have been foundational skills that now is catching up to them, that's impacting their progress? So I think that's where we live into a lot of like root cause analysis. Why might that be? Why might that be? Why might that be? And try to drill down as best as we can. But I think that that's the complexity of state level data that sounds and looks a little different than some of the work we're doing within multi-tiered systems of support with benchmark assessments, progress monitoring, common assessments, the collaborative teamwork of common formative assessments, just always engaging in, I'm teaching it, are they learning? What do I do when they don't? What do I do when they do? So it's a lot of the systems work that gets wrapped up in those data analyses. So I think your observation is key. I think that when we drill down to grade levels, that's where really the rubber hits the road with being able to determine what can we take away from this data that could be actionable.
And we haven't done that yet?
We haven't,
Just
no, that's really the space that we're living in now.
Okay, and then I've got one other slide.
Can I just make sure I'm hearing you right
Yeah.
on this? I don't want to lose train of thought, but, so you're saying, hey, yeah, we're still number one, the gap is closed a little bit, but to Dr. Vanderjack's point, some districts might be teaching to the test where we're not, so the STAR tests would maybe be a better indicator of how we've rebounded from the high of 2019 dip, and now we're on our way up. Would that be a better way to look at it?
I think that's fair. I also don't know what our peer group looked like in 2019.
Okay.
It might have looked
Oh, so this is apples to oranges.
it's two different kinds of apples, I would say.
Okay.
So I don't think, does that make sense? I mean, if the peer group
The
looked
list on the
same-
bottom's not the same in 2019 as it is in 2024.
That's the same. It's the same schools. I'm just saying we didn't probably compare ourselves to them back in 2019. So that gap was probably not even analyzed in 2019.
Interesting. Okay.
I see.
And then the other slide I want to, it's called SAT-EBRW.
This one?
There, yeah. What is, okay, evidence-based.
Reading and writing. Sorry.
Okay, so.
Not doing that on purpose, I promise.
No, that's fine. So I look at that one, and that one's even more dramatic to me from the standpoint of, it seems like we're regressing a little bit from where we were ourselves even over the last couple of years. But once again, you haven't had the opportunity yet to look at those and dig deeper into that, correct?
Yes, and I think that that's also where we may need to actually look at the numbers. So if you look at the chart at the bottom,
Yep.
we've got 74, 72, and 69. So there's slight decreases over time. But back in 2021, post-COVID, we were 67.6. Prior to that, it was 73. So we're living in that space a little bit when you look at the specific numbers. Sometimes the graph, because of the way that the data is set up, can look more dramatic maybe than it actually is without looking at those numbers.
So it's possible that 2017 could in itself be an outlier.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand. Okay, thank you very much. And once again, I'm just trying to understand these things, not to say, the wheels are falling off, but
Yeah.
just trying to see, okay, why would this look a little different than it has?
Us too. I mean, I think that that's the work that our ELA committee is doing. They have looked at all the standards, they're reviewing data, they're asking lots of good questions about all of the data that drills even more deeper than what even the state level data does.
Which is great, just on that point. If you were to put a trend line on that, my guess is your trend line would be a little bit on a downward trend with those data points that are on there. If you were to trend it down.
All of them, except for maybe the green one.
Green one, yeah. All the trend.
The green was probably pretty flat.
Well, I know I used to do, in my former life, I used to put some charts together like this, and I could make them look one way, or I could make them look another way, and I once had some area vice president said to me, Mr. Chansky, that slide is a little bit misleading.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying that's the case here, but if you don't understand completely what
Absolutely, and I think that that is one reason in particular that I present the same data year after year and use those same groups, because it tells a better story as we continue from year to year to look at trend data that is not apples to oranges, it's really apples to apples.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions for me? Nice job.
Thank you.
No.
Ask away.
Not right now.
Okay.
We're going to go on to the speed zone bids then.
Thank you. We have a few schools that we need to finish out, particularly 5. So we grouped this up into a bid package and asked OAK to run the project for us. We were surprised that we got another bidder because Strain has been doing all the work in Ottawa County. And so it was good to see that we were getting a fair price. Rank does a lot of work in the middle of the state, from, I guess, Mount Pleasant East, their big outfit over there. But yes, our recommendation will be to proceed for 5 locations, and that is the out in front of Baldwin Street in Georgetown, the 5-6 building, one in front of Allward, one in front of Riley, and one down in front of Jamestown Lower. And the signs are, it comes out to $22,570 for 5 signs. But they're those, we've already got them at Power and Forest Grove. They're working really, we had really favorable feedback from parents, administration, law enforcement.
Tell me now,
County.
percentages for what?
Pardon me?
The percentages for.
Traffic speed signs.
Those are the.
That flat,
got it,
they
got it.
slow down.
Got it, got it.
Very helpful.
Ottawa County deputies are still nabbing a lot of people going by Bauer every day, even despite the signs. But hopefully it's
You need
helpful.
to.
They're heading to classic right now.
They are. They're just flying through there.
But
They're late.
it hopefully helps. Like, I know the first person I got pulled over at Forest Grove, the deputy said, "Did you see the sign flashing?" And the person said, "Yeah, I was late."
Honesty is the best policy.
It is, it's not a ticket, but yeah. Hopefully deters a few people.
Yeah, we're just getting really good feedback on them, so
Oh.
keep our kids safe.
There was on 40th last week, I was taking a walk, and there was a bus that stopped, put on their flashers, and someone came, just ignored them, and went through, and right behind them was an Ottawa County deputy.
Good.
Put the light, I felt bad for the girl, you know, she was like 17 years old or something like that, but what are the chances that he's gonna be right there when someone?
Unfortunately, now with the cameras on the buses, they can report the footage with the camera.
Oh, yeah.
And take it later.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
Hopefully, I mean, that's terrible for her,
Right,
but
right.
yeah, but actually, it could be a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
in the
She'll
transportation
never do that
department,
again.
our bus drivers don't feel sorry for her.
No, I mean, I'm not, I just,
No.
in the
no
moment,
sympathy.
though, something.
All right,
Thank
any
you.
other questions for the speed zone? All right, insulin litigation.
So several, a couple of years ago, we had a potential of joining litigation regarding against Jewel for baby. Based on the volume of what that looked like as a district, we decided not to join that litigation. This is a little bit different situation. This is litigation, a class action suit regarding the increase in insulin that not only the insurance carriers are spending a lot of money on, but our employees. I don't know the exact number of employees. It was a challenge to try to find out how many, because obviously I can't just send an email out, please let me know if you're taking insulin. So it looks like we have a little under 5% of our employees that this could be affected. So as a district, I think it would be something that we should entertain as a board. If the board is interested, it's gonna be probably, they say 10 hours of work. I've heard somebody go through it, they said they got done less than 2. It's gonna take a little bit of work, but I think it'd be something as a district. I don't normally bring these to the board, but I think this would be something to entertain. I know that the three of us talked about it with Pam a month or so ago. I got additional information, that's why I brought it to the board tonight. And if so, then we'd like to I'd like to ask the board to approve a resolution at the November meeting to join us.
So this would be the school itself,
Yes.
would be joining the suit, and any funds recovered would go to whom?
So they go to the school, the district,
Yes.
and then they go to, and the legal firm.
So, right, so what I'm trying to get at,
The
so,
employee does not get the.
okay,
Because I
so
don't
it
know
goes
the
into our
I
fund
don't know who
for
they are.
the medic,
Offset
offset.
for medical
Okay.
expenses. 'Cause
otherwise
those,
it would be really difficult to not only figure that out, but to justify that, even though it's retainer only, there's still a lot of ins and outs of that. The other question is this for how many years prior insulin use?
I don't know, I think it's in 2019, I read somewhere.
Because in light of the legislation, that was what, a year or so ago that Biden signed, where they were required to reduce the cost of insulin? That's why I was trying to figure out exactly where they're going. So they're looking at, before this came into be, that they had to charge less.
That's correct.
All these pharmaceuticals were charging, according to this, more than they should have, and that we're recovering on behalf of
That's correct.
employees. Okay.
Questions?
Is there any
I was
downside?
gonna say, what's the cost besides
The downside is the amount of work we put into doing it, knowing that there might not be anything at the end of the day. When we run some rough numbers with a small percentage, I do a little bit of math, and I don't think there's a big downside.
Okay.
So we'll see this on November's.
Yeah, unless there's a strong, I don't want to put it on an agenda if I hear a
Everyone
strong.
okay with this?
Sure.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do.
Just out of curiosity, are there other neighboring districts that are looking at this as well?
Yes. And not only that, some of the insurance carriers are looking into it also. So you've got Mesa, the West Michigan Health Insurance, not called Pool. There's others that are also doing it.
All right, special education and English language course review.
So in your board packet this evening, there is one final, I believe, group of courses that Mandy and I are bringing to you this evening for discussion. Multilingual classes, or EL courses, are listed here, as well as special education courses. One thing that I do want to bring your attention to, I believe in the copy that you have, it says high school at the top. This really should just be board-approved courses / curriculum, because some of them are middle school, some of them are high school, some could even be in elementary, depending on the particular needs of the students in a particular year. So I think we will just remove high school from the top moving forward, and then these would be the courses that we offer, again, depending on needs and particular students in a particular year. Anything you might add maybe about our special education courses?
No, I mean, I think we always try to make interdisciplinary connections, so there's always a possibility of, one content area and maybe 10 courses time, by nature of it being a special ed program that we're trying to meet all of the goals and objectives, but anytime a student is participating in a special ed program as a class, and that class will be on their transcript, this would be the name of that course.
Any questions? All right, next up, policy revisions to number 5771, search and seizure.
Sure, so there's several districts in the area. This came up at a recent regional meeting about search and seizure and the use of, and truly the use of a metal detecting wand. You see when you go to maybe a concert or a sporting event. We have not, in the past, we do not have metal detectors when we walk in. However, the utilization of this is, the need is getting there. So the actual guideline itself, there's an administrative guideline asking for the board, this is a discussion now, bring it to the board for a first reading in November, second reading in December, just to add in board policy that it can be used. The policy, or the guideline itself, has clear directions around who can do it, how many people have to be present, gender, those type of things. So that's it. It's that. I know it looks overly simple, but it's a board policy. That's the intent.
So when you go to an East Kentwood basketball game,
Yep.
you walk through not a handheld, but a.
Correct.
So is that covered separately? Should we include something like that so we have the flexibility to do that in the future?
We already have that in.
Oh, it already is?
Yeah, we just don't have the use of a wand.
Got
And
it.
it's, yeah, so.
Is that part of this?
It's not, it's a different one that goes, it's just metal detectors.
Yeah, okay.
We don't have, I think if we ever put metal detectors in, it would be a much bigger conversation.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
So that's why we didn't, from the standpoint, we really just focused on the wand. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the wand is a deterrent also. Literally, when you walk in, I can tell you this, I know we think every kid is an angel, and some of them make poor choices, I would say, but when we have prom downtown at 20 Monroe Live, and they have their own security. They don't need board policy to say if you're going to come in here, here's what you're going through. And there's a handful of kids that make choices to not bring stuff with them, whether it's a vape or something, or a lighter or something. They went back to their car or left. So I did. The high school is very interested in having this conversation, but Mr. Vila wanted to come and share numbers and talk, and I said, no, I think it's pretty straightforward. If you have questions, I'll be more than happy to ask him to address it at the board meeting.
I think it's, like you said, a great deterrent.
Pretty straightforward. Thank you.
All right, next up, trip request.
We have 4 or 5 trip requests technically. Baseball, softball, heading warmer, south, spring break. Appreciate them submitting this request now and a couple weeks before the trip or after the trip. But then we also have the Winter Guard, which takes place, the Winter Guard and Percussion takes place right around spring break. But there's another competition for Winter Guard that's in Illinois before the national championships that we go to. These are standard trip requests they've gone before. I'd like to discuss them, and I think we're finally getting to a point after 7 years that they're submitting things in a timely fashion so that the board can take action in the consent agenda at the next meeting.
It's more than 7 years.
What was that?
It's been more than 7 years.
No, I know, but I think for me, it's been 7 years.
I
I think we're
understand.
finally getting to the point where they're understanding you gotta get this
Yeah,
stuff in.
very timely. Because I think it was baseball that won some from last year, and I said, we're not doing this again.
It was,
You get it in on time.
yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
I can tell you exactly.
Any questions for the trip request? All right. Comfort Don.
Yeah, so last but not least, we've had a lot of conversations about, we, not as a board have, but we in our office have had a lot of conversations about different kinds of animals in the district. Currently,
clearly, we have a policy regarding ADA and what are required by law to have animals. A miniature horse is considered an ADA animal that you could have both and have with you. But now a lot of the conversations over the past several years have shifted between, most people call them comfort dogs, not to be confused with therapy dogs. Okay, there's a difference between the two. When I was in my former district, we brought a few dogs in and we had a process and everything to go through. And actually the training took place in our buildings in the former district I worked in. The ironic part is the trainer actually lives in Hudsonville and would drive all the way up to Rockford to train the dogs. When I came here, she said, can I start training in Hudsonville? So we've had dogs trained in our buildings for the past 6.5 years. Not constantly, but every once in a while you might walk in Georgetown or Baldwin, maybe even the high school or a sporting event, and you could see a dog and it was in training. We do not have policy around having comfort dogs, which we would consider district-owned dogs. In order to bring them in, we'd have to create policy. We'd have to go through that whole process, and then we have to find who's the handler, which could be the owner, but it might not be the owner. So we're trying to figure all those things out. The request to get 2 comfort dogs takes almost 18 months to 24 months. So I'm not asking you to approve policy. I just want to have the conversation because you are aware that that's the direction we're trying to go. I think it's good for attendance. I think it's good for a lot of our kids that may need that, whether it be a rough day or a situation going on, to have them in the district. So I do want to thank Mrs. Armstrong. She's very, she loves her dogs and she can't wait to work with a comfort dog. I'm just kidding. So I do want to thank this because it's a lot of work. There's clearly a process, procedures that would follow, find the right people, and go from there. So right now, we are looking at trying to bring 1 or 2 dogs for the start of the 26-27 school year. I just wanted to see if there are any questions or conversations that we'll continue to have, but I didn't want to get too far ahead of this now, bring this to the board.
So would this be a traveling dog? Would it travel to different buildings? It would be at?
One building, now if it's a teacher, it's in one classroom.
Okay.
If it's a counselor, it's in the office area. But it stays with the handler. So if you think of a 3rd grade teacher, that could be the handler. That dog is in that 3rd grade classroom. If the dog needs to go to another classroom for a student or the office, then somebody would go to that teacher's class, and that teacher would be with the dog to go to the office, for example. Or during my prep, I might bring him or her to another classroom. But they stay with the handler all day long.
So the thing that I think of, because I'm allergic to a lot of animals, just being in their presence, trying to figure that out, trying to make sure that a student isn't excluded for something because, or fear. I mean, there are plenty of kids that are fearful of animals, and I'm assuming that's part of that process, but I guess as this goes along, I'd like to know how we're going to deal with those kind of sticky parts.
Yeah, there's a whole presentation that I'll share with the board and go through it. And I just don't want to get too far ahead of this. We have a year and a half, but but yes, there's a lot of conversations about fear, a lot of conversations about allergies. Those things are all taken into account. And the easiest answer is for allergies is the dog might not be in the student and dog just won't be in the same classroom or the same part of the classroom depending on the severity of the allergies. Mm-hmm. Kind of like latex balloons, right? Mm-hmm. Just make sure you're aware that it's a dog-free zone, I guess is another thing. Good question.
Only dogs?
Yeah.
Well, as Dr. Vanderjagt knows, I'm a very strong advocate of this. There are comfort dogs in every hospital, the nursing homes. I feel in many ways that we're a tad bit behind because other districts have dogs and some of them have a dog in every building now. So I am thrilled that we are looking to do this. The comfort with anxiety and depression in kids, there's just so much research that supports us. So I'm really happy that we're moving ahead.
Agreed. Are there significant insurance implications or things like that?
Thank you, yeah. We're not inventing a wheel here. To Gerber's point, everybody's doing this, and I just,
Not everybody, but
the ones that we compare ourselves to.
there's a few districts in the area that are doing this.
And they're doing it great, and I know this is gonna be a huge win for our buildings. I'm in the buildings that train them right now, and it's great to see the kids. It's fun to see the interaction. It's different between elementary kids that have a dog versus how it's used in high school. And it's beneficial all across the board, so thanks for the hard work you've done and more work to be done in the next year and a half.
And I don't want to disregard the policy, but we've had conversations about our policy provider. So I don't know if I want to get too deep into that until we find out what Forrest is going to do.
Is there any way we could expedite the number of dogs we get quicker, or? Just kind of
Unless
wait?
you, it's about a litter,
Okay,
and then it takes about 18 months to train, and they can't, a puppy's not going to be
okay.
and they're all labs or Goldens. So
Okay.
I was in contact with Kim last week, and she said she's now there's a litter, so there's a potential we might get one sooner,
Okay,
but it's all about training and finding the right mix, and then it's working closely with Anne, working with making sure we find the right handler and location, and it's just we would own the dog.
mhm,
Right, so then the conversations about, are there businesses out there that want to help support, whether it be shots or food or those type of things. There's a lot of layers to this, and I think it's good for kids.
okay.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, then we will do a roundtable. We'll start with Mr. Hall.
All set.
And me as well, thank you. I just want to say thank you to Amy, the data, the stuff is really good, we're really doing well, and your team did a good work on the audit as well, thank you.
Also,
Also,
You want your audit report back?
I was gonna say, may I,
Yes.
if anybody needs one, take it, but if not, we can put it to use. Thank you.
All right, I will take a motion to adjourn. From Mark,
Support?
support from me, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.